artificial intelligence will take care of a lot of the heavy lifting work that people used to do so that people can go and apply themselves on almost like high dimension problems. So if you use something like artificial intelligence, you will have an entire population that can go and apply themselves on high dimension problems. And I think that will really help push the world forward.
Welcome to the Issuer Academy, Paymentology's podcast to innovate, scale, and provide impact. I'm your host, Merusha Naidu. If you're a fintech professional, banking leader, or an innovator in the digital payment space, you're in the right place. Here, we deep dive into the challenges and triumphs of launching next-generation card programs, from virtual cards and digital wallets to cross-border FX solutions. Let's get started. Welcome to the Issuer Academy. Today, we're peeling back buzzwords and getting real about fintech and financial literacy and what it really takes to build inclusive systems in Africa and beyond. We're joined today by two incredible leaders who are at the forefront of this transformation. First off, we have Theo Kitshoff, the CEO and co-founder of Sticitt, a company reimagining financial literacy for children through innovative tools like their payment cards for kids. We have Drisha Kirkman, Head of Program Management and Sustainability at Paymentology. Paymentology is working on driving scalable, sustainable payment solutions across Africa. Theo, Drisha, welcome to the show. I thought we would start with something a little bit fun to get our energy up, because building in fintech is full of surprises, right? So the first one is, what's the most unexpected lesson you've learned while working in the fintech space? Theo, to you first.
Thank you, Merusha. So there are quite a few lessons that we've learned already, but the most interesting one, I very much grew up with the idea that build it and the people will come. And that is not at all how it works. So that for me was just something very interesting that we are struggling with every day and fighting with every day. And something that I think a lot of other co-founders need to sort of like get over that idea, because that's not how it works.
That's so true. Everyone thinks they have a good idea, but how do you actually put it into practice, right?
Absolutely.
And drive adoption. It's so interesting. Drisha, over to you.
Yeah, I think for me, it was when you explain to somebody in fintech, they're always like, well, what is fintech? And I think the most surprising thing in fintech is that fintech touches everyone, from youth, which we'll be discussing a bit further, to adults, across the spectrum of people, from people who are considered low-end users or earners to everybody who's completely digitally savvy. So fintech actually touches pretty much everybody.
Yeah. It's such a vast segment. And you're right, it touches every single person, but also everything we do every single day.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what I think makes it so exciting and fun, and why we all love this space, right? So let's set the stage. The big picture of fintechs and financial inclusion. Across Africa, fintechs aren't just about apps and payments. It's about creating entirely new systems of trust, access, and opportunity. But with every breakthrough, the question remains, who are we building for? And so let's have a bit of an open discussion here. Theo, Drisha, both of you work at the intersection of innovation and inclusion. What excites you most about how fintechs are reshaping financial access across Africa?
Drisha made reference to it, that fintech touches everyone. And I think how we phrase it is, money systems is inevitable as part of everyday life for every single person pretty much on earth these days. So the way that we go about solving problems when it comes to financial infrastructure, financial services, and those sort of things are critical, because everybody will engage with it, and we need to make sure that those systems serve people as best it possibly can. If we exclude a whole bunch of people from that, it means that we are almost structurally making sure that they do not have the same opportunities than what everyone else out there will have. So for us, what's exciting is the advent of a lot of interesting technologies are making it easier to reach people, and are making it easier for us to provide services which are money related in a way that can better serve people. So I think the technology game has moved on significantly in financial services, and it needs to continue doing that so that we can reach more and do more with regards to how we serve people from a money perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about how we actually serve people too, better their lives, right? Drisha, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, adding on to that, it's about serving people. It's about creating those opportunities to bring everybody into the financial inclusion space. I mean, if you look at this continent, it's fascinating some of the technology that has come out of it. I mean, we've seen the growth of mobile money, and that was created, to create a payment system that was at low cost, not touching banking rails. Similarly, we've seen cases where people need access to financial solutions, and how do they get it when they don't have a credit history? And so the tech that's become available to support those drives adoption and inclusion to a lot of people on the continent. So that's why, I mean, like Theo says, like what Theo and the team are doing, there are so many other fintechs out there doing the same. And it's all about creating a service that's going to support the consumers and meet them at the point that they are in their lives.
That is such an excellent point, because the reality is we all want to build great tools, great new features and that kind of thing. But what are the people who are using it actually ready for, right? What can they actually accept and understand? And that's a key driver of this discussion, right? Patricia, you point out a really important topic, talking about what is a continent ready for. When you look at it, Africa is often called a leapfrog continent when it comes to especially tech adoption, right? In your view, what has enabled this leapfrogging, and what risks do we face if we don't build with true inclusion in mind from the very start? Theo, do you want to start?
It's probably over-focused on, I think, the mobile phone, but it's a very practical tool that makes it possible for us to effectively reach anyone in Africa, right? You don't have to go through physical, logistical problems to actually speak to people and engage with people. So I think that the mobile phone has sort of like forced the African continent to leapfrog a whole bunch of other technologies and forced industry to adapt in the way that they build solutions so that it can be consumed through a mobile device. I do in that it presents a whole lot of, I think, limitations and restrictions and risks that we as an industry need to figure out how we better serve. Because in my view, and I mean, our experiences, the way that financial infrastructure has moved forward, specifically in South Africa, there are still a whole bunch of structural issues that I think the advent of mobile technologies can't get access to the same level of financial services that I can do through a PC or through a tablet, even for that matter. Everything is not yet available through something like a mobile device. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. But I mean, that's where Africa is leapfrogging everyone else. They've jumped over all the other technologies. Everyone's got a mobile phone. So how do we serve those people better from a financial point of view, leveraging those mobile devices? Ultimately.
Absolutely. And Drisha, over to you, because you've seen a lot of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, adding on to Theo's points, not to give some stats, but I mean, mobile smartphone penetration is actually growing significantly on the continent. I mean, by 2030, 90% of sub-Saharan Africa will have access to a smartphone. I mean, South Africa, it's 95% already have access to it. So agreeing with Theo, I mean, it's the fact that people have access to mobile phones, which has made a big difference. Similarly, if you look at the actual population age mean of the continent, we are a young continent. Compared to most Western countries, our population is very young. In fact, there's stats about how Africa will become the global employee workforce in the near future by 2045, I think it is. So I think if you add mobile plus youth in terms of our age, that adds to our ability to adopt new technologies and move faster on it. And then, touching on Theo's points, I mean, I totally agree that there are a lot of nuances that people have to face. It's with infrastructure, it's with the high cost of data that still exists. It's not having electricity for long extended periods of time. So as much as the technology is there, if fintechs and companies don't cater for some of these nuances on the continent, it just won't work. You could have the smartest app, but if it's not on, if you don't have any connectivity, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
You're so right, because I mean, when we look at it, right, 5 years ago, the discussion was, okay, smartphones versus feature phones. We were still doing USSD.
Correct.
Now it's like, okay, like you said, 90% of the population will have smartphone penetration. But again, we will still have barriers that we need to overcome, like connectivity, like infrastructure, limited infrastructure across the continent, and how we actually work together to create better systems and tools for customers to actually access all of those things is so, so critical to building real financial inclusion and literacy. Let's move on now to breaking down barriers in financial education and innovation in Africa, because the two go hand in hand. Big ideas are important, but the real magic happens when we turn those into practical tools. So let's dive now into how each of you are moving the needle in financial inclusion. Theo, Sticitt is helping children build healthy financial habits before the bad ones take root. What inspired you to start Sticitt, and how can early financial education change the future of inclusion across Africa?
Before the bad ones take root. So, shame. I actually feel bad for the parent audience because ultimately kids just take after their parents, right? So, what
Always being the parents, right?
well, I mean, as a parent myself of two little ones, I think about these things really a lot. And what inspired us, Merusha, is me and my two co-founders, and I must say like the entire team at Sticitt, is we take it very seriously to think what are the key challenges that's facing society? How can we simplify it to something we can understand? And how do we build solutions that can go and build us a better future for the next generation? Okay, so just three of the key things that from the start, we had an issue with in terms of how today's world works. Excessive consumption, instant gratification, and let's just call it like an over-indebted population from a consumer debt point of view. And we just felt, you know what, those three things are things that we need to try something that the Gen Alphas don't have the same issues and constraints that the current millennials have. Because how will the current millennial generation truly go and achieve their best version of themselves and participate as aggressively as they can if they have a whole bunch of restraints when it comes to something like over-indebtedness, just as a simple example. So for us, it was really, that encouraged us to say, how are we going to fix those three problems as an example? And we picked the financial services space specifically because we felt that the money systems are at the core of a lot of those problems that we actually face today. And a practical example is, this is not stepping on anyone's toes. I think the existing industry has done a great job to get us to where we are today. But most reward schemes these days incentivize additional consumption to get stuff that we can go and buy more stuff that we don't need. Yes, you are seeing some programs here and there that's trying to sort of like change that narrative, but that's just a very straightforward example of how money systems needs to better serve people. So we just said, listen, that's going to be our focus point. And when it comes to empowering an entire next generation and driving something like financial inclusion, is we just said, let's start with the youth market because we still have a chance in a blank canvas to go and teach them a different way of thinking about these things, right? And let's give the parents of today the tools so that through doing, the kids can ensure they pick up really good and healthy money habits. And hopefully they can then go and help solve those problems that we're currently facing as a future generation. So, and from an inclusion point of view, is everybody needs to have the same playing field. Everybody needs to understand these things because otherwise there will be subsets of the society that will still be left behind and will still have the same problems faced by current generations. So, we can go on a long time about this, but it was that really motivated us to say, we've got to try something. We're not going to wait for the existing industry. We want to be part of that change.
Yeah, I love that point because the reality is what you're doing is you're giving parents the tools because they don't actually, most parents, my parents, my mom had very bad payment, processes and habits and so budgeting wasn't a thing back then, know. And so the fact that you're giving parents the tools to say, okay, let's teach you a better way of doing things and let's set the right behavior with the next generation. I think that is so critically important because what you're teaching them is, you're not teaching them how to fix a car, you're not teaching them, a physical occupation, but you're teaching them how to make sure that throughout their lives, they can actually manage their finances across everything from, how they budget for rent, how they budget for fuel, how they budget for, electricity, data, all of those things. So important.
If I can maybe jump in there, Merusha, the funny thing is we actually start the entire journey with trying to get parents to teach kids that they need to do something useful before they even get money. So forget about money. That's not the point here. The point is do something useful. And if you do that, you will actually start getting some money. So that was for us sort of like the first step of the mindset change. And that can actually involve just properly cleaning the car. Do something worthwhile that someone else will value and you will then get some. And then all the other habits in our world starts. But yeah, just as a
You're actually setting the right behavior across the board, because it's also teaching kids about responsibility in general life. I must say, moving from South Africa to the UK, I've had to learn how to do a whole bunch of things that I've never had to do in South Africa, like taking trains, carrying groceries, 3 miles. So it's very important to teach kids that responsibility and owning how they actually operate on a day-to-day basis. So it's very, very interesting. Drisha, moving over to you, when we look at scaling payments in underserved communities is no mean feat, right? What are the biggest barriers you've seen, and how does Paymentology tackle them?
So, we've touched on some of the nuances that occur in this continent. And I think when it comes to supporting a lot of fintechs, I think a lot of it is that while payments happens every day, everybody swipes a card, there is a whole lot of things that happen in the background that people don't realize. And from a Paymentology perspective, we started in South Africa. We've been doing this for 20 years. So a lot of our job is almost to have people understand what happens in the background and make that whole process simple. And we try and uncomplicate things by almost in South Africa providing a card in a box solution, because something that does take a lot of time and is very complicated is getting a BIN sponsor in place. And in South Africa, we're lucky enough to have one of the biggest banks, Standard Bank, as our main BIN sponsor. And in the rest of Africa, we have relationships with banks that we do bring to fintechs, which makes that process a lot easier. Similarly, from a tech perspective, we spoke about how big mobile wallets are, and Paymentology started working with wallet providers and MNOs since 2013, 2014. So having our technology integrated into wallets and mobile money solutions is something that we've been doing for many, many years. And we power some of the biggest mobile money solutions on the continent, like Safaricom, Orange, Vodacom. So it's things like that that can almost simplify it for our customers, and that allows them to focus on things that they're passionate about. So like in Theo's case, focus on the education and the consumer behavior, and not having to worry about all of the background things that happens on the payment side. I think that's what Paymentology really brings to the continent when it comes to scaling fintechs.
Drisha, I would love to actually just add on to that, almost more attest to that. When you talked about someone tapping a card and it's like money just goes from the one person to the other person, right? How complex can it be? But it's almost like when you open a tap and the water comes out, it's like, how complex can it be? But start following the water back to the main municipal plant. It is the amount of plumbing that they often refer to that goes on behind the scenes to make the water come out, to make that payment go, is insane. And what we've been super thankful for from a Paymentology point of view is, as part of giving parents the tools to ensure kids have got good money habits, that needs to be part of their everyday use of money. And when you talk about everyday use of money, they need to have something that they can go and transact with wherever they want to transact with, right? And that's where the MasterCard, and call it the issuing solution that you guys offer, was so valuable, is because we didn't have to worry about all of that plumbing stuff that needs to happen and all the heavy lifting that occurs. Is we can just ultimately get a card that we can make part of our user experience to ultimately ensure parents can equip the kids to pick up better habits from a young age. So, that was a attestation to the complexity behind the scenes that you guys take care of, and just how it can empower someone like us to not have to worry about that, but almost like abstract a little bit higher to go and solve for another use case.
I think that's the beauty of it, right? Because what we're really saying here is, through a mutually beneficial partnership, you're able to create real financial inclusion by Sticitt being able to build what you need to provide to your customers to create the environment for education and inclusion. And at the same time, Paymentology managing all of the complexities in the background and really helping fintechs to break down the barriers of entering the payment space. So together, this is why partnerships are just so, so important in our ecosystem. So I really, really love that. Thank you.
I think if we want to change the future for next generations to come, we have to do partnerships, right?
Absolutely.
There's not going to be one person or one company that manages to do all of that. So completely agree.
Perfect. I think it's really all about all of us doing what we do really, really well in our segment.
Absolutely.
Doing what we do with excellence. You do what you do with excellence. And then we really provide something enormously powerful to the communities. Financial literacy. So I want to touch on this one because it really is the missing piece when it comes to true inclusion, right? And that's often a part that's left out. So access to digital wallets and bank accounts is growing at a rapid pace, right? But without financial literacy, it's like handing somebody a car without teaching them how to drive it, really. So when we look at true financial empowerment, it starts not with access, but with understanding. Theo, why do you think financial literacy is such a major gap, even as access to digital financial tools becomes more accessible and expands?
So a lot of different angles that's immediately jumping to mind. So what we as Sticitt did, as an example, is we actually recently wrote a book. And the book is really how to form habits that stick with regards to financial literacy. And the reason why we wrote the book is we realized a lot of the industry out there is really almost like product focused. If you go to a new financial service provider, you get a product brochure that often you need an engineering degree to understand. Okay, but there's no almost like terms and conditions of use with care. And a practical example that I recently experienced was I was driving in the car listening to 5FM on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. And the specific discussion was around credit scores and debt. And I'm super passionate about the whole debt world. In my view, debt's like a loaded gun. It can be the most powerful thing in the right situation, but more than often, it's the most dangerous trigger that you will ever pull. But the whole discussion went about credit scores, and the guidance that the individual on the talk show gave was how important it is to get a credit card so that you can start building up a credit score so that you can one day get access to debt. And I was like, how with all of the context that we need to give people around that statement, is that the guidance we want to give into the markets? So the reason why we did a book is like we built this really cool platform with all of these lovely tools for parents to help the kids ingrain healthy money habits. But the important thing that we actually did was more the narrative around how a parent and a kid needs to think about the role that money plays in their life and how dangerous it can be if you don't use it correctly and if you don't plan accordingly. And that is often when people talk about financial literacy, it's immediately do you save enough?
Yes.
Or do you have a budget? But those are two of the very almost like elementary concepts in how you need to perceive money. So it's something that, and I mean, that's why we as a business exist. And that's what we really want to see change over the next 5 to 10 years, is that it's not about product innovation itself. It's about how do we drive the game forward with regards to how these products are deployed to better serve people. And that's for us the big frustration and what we want to really try and solve with regards to our whole parent offering. So yeah, I mean, just where we're missing the gap on financial literacy is, I think we're completely missing it. And we don't have a good construct of what that actually means. We're talking loosely about it. It's always a very important thing, but when you start asking people how do you quantify it and what's the thinking behind it, it's always the same stuff. Save more, budget more, but there's a couple of key elements missing. And to just make my point as well is, as I mentioned, the first one is financial literacy is not even about money. It's about doing something useful. That's where everything needs to start, right? We've all got something to add. Go and do it. If you do it, you'll get some money. And the last important thing for us was, it's not just about you, this whole thing. Often financial literacy is about how much do you save? How much do you invest? How much do you plan for yourself? But we're also part of a bigger society. So we end our habits with, you need to give as well. That's a very important thing that you need to teach kids, that it's not only about you. We don't want to have a completely like narcissistic society in the next 20 to 30 years. So those are some of the elements that we just felt was sort of like missing. And it's a bit of a narrative change in terms of the role that money needs to play in our lives. But yeah, I mean, you can get me going on this, and we could spend the whole afternoon here.
Nope.
So
I'm
going to try and keep it concrete.
I didn't know that you wrote a book, and I think that just goes to show your passion around really creating behavior patterns and changing the way people think. And I think that's so important. I'm not trying to plug your book, but I'm just saying, I think that we could all benefit from really having a deep understanding about what is financial literacy. Like you said, budgeting is a very, very basic, it's the most basic level, right? So if anyone hasn't seen it, I will, encourage them to go and have a look at your book.
We are it will be available probably within like 2 days.
They go for a punt.
But we want the entire
Yeah.
country to have it.
I'm a parent, and I would love to read it. And I mean, to your point, raising kids in this society, in today's society, I mean, it's difficult as it is.
Yeah, it's difficult.
And then to think about how you actually get them to understand what financial literacy is.
Yes.
It's a very tough concept. It's like, okay, save in your piggy bank, and it's what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that almost feels like an ad hoc, because everyone does a piggy bank and you need to save money in the piggy bank, right? So it's almost like just through generations, that's what we do.
That's what
and
you
that's how we
do.
define financial literacy. Drisha, just a comment on what you just made from how important it is. And as a parent, like what are you actually doing? If we think about financial literacy, like where are kids going to pick up and be taught these concepts?
Yeah.
Is it at school? No.
No.
Okay. It's not happening there. So then it will be with parents. But now, if I ask you, in the priority list of things that you need to do at home and that you need to just try and juggle all the balls in your life, where does financial literacy actually sit?
Yeah,
for a priority?
absolutely.
It's nowhere. It doesn't exist anywhere. And that for us was the thing of it. There's almost a little bit of education that needs to happen here, where parents need to know how important this is, and they need to go and think of what is my approach going to be with regards to what I instill in my kids. And the idea with the whole book, Merusha, was you actually don't need our solution. You don't need a Sticitt money account to fulfill and to live out the principles that we talk about in the book. You can do it on a Excel spreadsheet. You can do it on the fridge, for that matter. But that's the thing that we want people to be talking about, is like, we've got a responsibility as parents that needs to be higher up there in terms of how we teach the next generation. But shame, I mean, we've got a lot of other stuff to do as well. So.
That understanding piece is so important, both for parents and for kids, and really changing the way we operate as a society, just, making better decisions and making more informed decisions, because now you have the knowledge to say, okay, I can do this in a better way. Even though I've never done it before, I can try something different. And I think that's really the power of what you've created. Drisha, and, I want to cut over to you because you touched, on changing everyday lives of people, right? What do you think is the best way to integrate financial education into people's everyday lives? Working at Paymentology, you work with so many different fintechs. How have you seen them, really do it well?
If people wanted a straightforward card or a bank account, they could get it. There's so many banks, traditional, digital, neo, all of that they could have access to. I think it's got to be, what can you give that's but more to it? So like in the example of Sticitt, there's a particular use case, which is around the literacy and around youth education. And yes, the card component or the account in the background is something that's added or layered onto it. So similarly, I think we also work with fintechs and companies that have an engaging solution or something that is going to make a difference and change people's lives. And we try and support it by simplifying the payment side. And there's a couple of things when it comes to, how do you actually make it work for people? I think just from a pure payments perspective, it's got to work. It's got to, there's nothing worse than, somebody who's doing a card transaction for the very first time and it doesn't work. And then
you stand in that queue and you're like, people behind you and it just doesn't work.
It just doesn't. And they're getting flustered.
Yeah.
So you can imagine a go-go, who's gotten her card and it doesn't work. What is she going to do? She's going to go straight to cash. And then that just almost ends your journey before it begins. So, we've got to focus on actually making stuff work. At the same time, what I do encourage a lot of our fintechs and clients when issuing those type of solutions to do is also just look at the use cases and how do you actually speak to the use case. Because again, just saying, here's a virtual card or here's a card, okay.
Now what?
You've got to go down to the level of, okay, do you want to pay your bills or do you want to have access to DSTV and Uber without having a full-blown credit card or be able to buy on Amazon? This is what you do. So it's almost meeting people at the level that you're trying to engage with them when it comes to issuing, especially on the payment side of things.
And understanding the needs as well.
Absolutely.
Not everyone has the same needs. So that's also a very important aspect to look at. And I absolutely love what you said. If it doesn't work, people will revert back to what they know, what they're comfortable with. And so that's such an important point to say, look, in order for us to make this people actually evolve and take on new tools, it's got to work. They've got to feel confident and they've got to trust what you're doing, really.
Absolutely.
Right?
But not just trust what you're doing, what you do needs to work. Otherwise, they'll lose trust and they'll revert back.
Exactly.
Which is like classic change management 101.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the thing doesn't want to work, that needs to work.
It's the basics.
Yes.
I'm going to go draw cash.
I'm going to go get cash.
Yeah, 100%. Theo, I think that you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to go back to it. In your view, how can we better integrate financial literacy into the formal education system, particularly in communities where access to financial services is still really, really new or limited?
Merusha, our take on that was actually where our whole payment platform from an acquiring point of view, which is now not necessarily what you're doing with yourselves, Drisha, on the issuing side, pretty much came in. As we said, well, you know what, there's actually a big need for acceptance solutions at schools because schools are struggling to collect funds from their parent communities and they're inundated with administration. So they're not getting to building vibrant learning environments for the kids, right? So we sort of said, well, schooling is the perfect place to start to help schools simplify that payment ecosystem. And that will give us a touch point to every single kid and to every single parent that we can then start the journey with the whole financial education game as well. Because the problem that we faced when we started this is we knew we needed to get to the kid and to the parent. But it's like, how do you build a sustainable model that you can sign up those customers if they're not necessarily even aware that the problem is that big, right? So we sort of built that into our distribution strategy to get to the parent and the kid was effectively building a payment solution to better serve schools and other education organizations so that we can use that footprint to get closer to the parent-kid relationship and then start influencing that way. Because it is a difficult thing. If you want to help the kid, it's a minor, it's still under the guardian still needs to sign for everything. You can't do anything without the guardian, right? So, I mean, how will the sign-up process work if you want to get to all the kids in the country and through actual money solutions serve them? You need a guardian. But I mean, it just becomes a very difficult distribution problem to solve. And even the guardian is not even aware of the problem necessarily. So our approach was effectively the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Let's work with schools because those schools and the education institutions further down the line, they pretty much touch most of the next generation, right?
Absolutely.
So let's empower them to better serve those kids. And then let's work the road with the kid and the guardian to better empower the kid.
I love that. Again, partnership through education.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. And I mean, to your point, I think when you do touch the schools and kids get used to using things like a digital solution, it actually does then, work in the favor of reducing cash. And they've already know now, well, money is a card. It's not necessarily, actual wants of cash. And that's how we actually drive financial inclusion.
Yeah.
By just educating them into the removal of cash.
We've had various interesting discussions on this topic where initially people were very against our whole approach of everything is digital. We need to go back to giving kid cash that they can feel the value of money. Okay. And then the whole idea was like, listen, but you're teaching them something that they will never ever in their life probably see in any event. Okay. Because stuff's going digital. So it was just a very interesting concept is like even our parent audiences were sort of like stuck on this old school cash thing because that's how you teach kids value.
You put
right? So
like, coins in the bank.
No, that's not at all. Now they just tap and they don't even know what's going on. So we need to like change the game in terms of how we educate in a non-cash world.
I think you need a tooth fairy money card.
Drisha, the next big idea.
Next big idea. Stick it tooth fairy money.
We've talked a lot about building. So let's look at the technology that actually drives inclusion because that's really, what we're building and creating here. Because technology can either, bridge divides or technology can also deepen divides, right? So as we design the future of fintech inclusion has to be built from the very start. So when you think about Sticitt, you were thinking about inclusion from the very beginning. So when you look at it, Theo, when you build a technology aimed at young people, how do you ensure that it's truly inclusive from the start, reaching kids from every socioeconomic background?
Merusha, it's a very good question. And I even want to make it a bit more complex through an example we had the other day where we were part of a group of startups. And the individual running the group show he asked the question, how many of you design for visually impaired people when you design your user experiences? And we were like, no, not really. And then they went into the stats of how big of the population struggles with that specific thing.
Yeah.
And it was something like, I can't remember the exact stat, it was between 6 and 7%. And we all sat there and we were like, okay, shucks, so sorry, we've from the start excluded 6 to 7% of the population in the way that we design our product. And we were just like, okay, this is kind of awkward. We need to like rethink how we do these things because often we just like jump into solution mode, right? And we're like, okay, cool, let's build an app because everyone's got a smartphone. But I think we still have a long way to go to ensure that those sort of considerations are better included and incorporated in our design process of the problems that we want to solve. And we haven't done enough of that, to be 100% honest. So I would love to sit here and say we're doing this and this and this and this, and we've got all this covered, but we don't. And I think that was for us really an eye-opener to make sure that we don't exclude a big portion of the population by just jumping into solution mode too quickly. So part of our statement for how we envision the world is that all people need to have healthy financial habits, and the all is like bolded and underlined. So we haven't solved it yet, but that's something really that we need to make sure we actually get to, because otherwise we're leaving a lot of people behind.
And this is the thing, right? Financial inclusion is for everyone.
Yeah.
And you're right, we're at the very start of it. We're scratching the surface. There's so many more things that we need to think about in order to create, true inclusivity. Drisha, I want to look at you. So Paymentology also operates across some of the most diverse and challenging markets. How do you build technology that is resilient and also in areas where, connectivity is limited, infrastructure is limited? How do you do it?
With great difficulty.
I'm glad you're taking this question.
But I mean, it's a similar mindset to what you had with Sticitt. We think about our target audience and the areas that they are operating in and try to adapt the technology to suit that environment as much as possible. So, for example, payments does not necessarily have to be via an app or a smartphone or even a physical card. We've had situations where we've had card details sent on SMS.
Yes.
If you'd all remember SMSs, USSD.
SMS?
WhatsApp. We have payment solutions via WhatsApp. So any form of technology that's actually available within that country and that is being used within the wallet that's run by USSD menu or SMSs, those type of things, our technology can suit that. Even in weird cases that you wouldn't ever really expect for, like whether, before back in the day when it was all just run via PC and sending card information via that, or even email. We've done all of that. So I think, it's about designing for what works in that current market and environment and adapting the technology to suit it.
100%. I mean, I think that design piece is so important because looking forward, if we look at the future of financial education and, inclusion, the future isn't something that we passively walk into, right? It's something that we design with intention. And so, if we peer a little further down the road, what will it really take to build financial inclusion that's not just a buzzword? When we look at making financial inclusion, a reality across the continent, it really is about building with intention, making sure that we're building for what people are ready for, what people understand, but at the same time, driving innovation. So, Theo, what coming innovations could revolutionize how we teach and spread financial literacy across Africa?
The one most obvious one for me is, I think, artificial intelligence. And the only reason why I think so is, in our view, artificial intelligence will take care of a lot of the heavy lifting work that people used to do so that people can go and apply themselves on almost like high dimension problems, so that we can figure out how are we going to solve like these really difficult challenges. Whereas currently we're spending a lot of energy and mental capacity on solving almost like mundane vanilla type tasks, right? So I think if you use something like artificial intelligence, you will have an entire population that can go and apply themselves on high dimension problems. And I think that will really help push the world forward. I'm not necessarily, blockchain and decentralized ledgers and these sort of things are all cool tech, but for me, it's not that much of a, like, moving the game forward. It's definitely improvement, like absolutely improvement. But I think if you give people the freedom to go and apply themselves in a different way, not having to do mundane stuff, it's going to be super exciting what we'll see. And I think that for me is the most exciting technology that will let people achieve their full potential to a certain extent, because you don't have these boring things that you still need to do. The computer and the artificial intelligence can do
Taking
those
care
things.
of it, exactly.
Taking care of it, yeah.
And we're seeing AI being used in really creative ways. And I think if you use AI in the right way, where it's, for a specific need and to tackle some of these problems that actually customers don't need to think about, it really is going to help bridge that gap between what does the customer need to do and what do they need to understand versus what can AI take over and do in the background for us. Pretty much like what Paymentology is doing from the tech side, right? I'm so sad that we have to wrap up, but I want to touch on, some of the final thoughts. And to wrap up today's discussion, Theo, I want to know if you could leave one piece of advice for other fintech founders who are trying to make a difference, specifically in the financial education and inclusion space, what would it be?
Pick a line that you're really passionate about and keep on pursuing until you hopefully achieve some sort of significance. It's not easy, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's messy. Most of the time it's really messy. So I think having a purpose around an end state that you can really get behind is the most important thing, because it's so tough along the line and you're competing with behemoths out there that I think it's going to be difficult to persevere if you don't really believe in the world that you're trying to create. So that for me is, if you don't have it yet, go and find it, figure it out, sit with your team and find that one thing that you can truly say you were all super, super passionate about. And why I was put on this earth sort of resonates with where this company wants to go, because then you'll be able to persevere in those difficult moments. Yeah, so no product advice, no market fit advice, none of those things, just that. I think that's the most important thing, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that passion and that drive to really fix a problem and, want to make things better for everyone is so, so special and important. And not all of us have the capacity to think that way every day, because you get so bogged down with everyday life. And the fact that we have true innovators like yourself who are stopping to say, hey, there's a better way of doing this. Hey, we can make things better, I think is so inspirational. So, firstly, thank you for everything that you're doing at Sticitt. And I can promise you when I have kids, they're going to use the app, or I'll use the app. But it's really great. Drisha, last words from you. So fast forward post 2025, what's one bold innovation or trend you believe will redefine Africa's fintech scene for the better?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think
After that one.
yes, it's hard. That's a hard act to follow.
Very hard. Sorry about that.
I hope you didn't plan on saying decentralized ledgers.
Decentralized. I was about to just say alternate currencies as well. And no, I mean, look, Theo did mention AI, and I think that there's a couple of things. There's definite trend and move towards using the technology to fast track a lot of services and in driving inclusion. Similarly, there are things that have opened up the market, like open banking, that's become very popular. People are doing lots of IoT and decentralized currencies. Those are all trends that are happening. I think, though, people should bear in mind is that embedded finance is still something that can be grown, especially in the continent. I don't think anyone's cracked it 100% as yet. I mean, there are quite a few offerings out there, but are they tailored to that market, and do they provide enough capabilities and enough solutions to that customers? I don't think so. So I still think there is an opportunity for a really strong embedded finance play that would definitely drive inclusion. Because again, are you thinking about the gogo who's going to do one transaction but then has other needs? Maybe she's got part of a stockfell. How is she going to do that? At the same time, are you addressing a solution for a micro merchant who maybe needs cash on a daily basis because his suppliers are not accepting payments? So it's those type of solutions. It's never going to be a one size fits all, but are you really addressing specific needs like Sticitt is? And have you created an entire embedded finance solution is what I would say.
Yeah. What is a localized version of embedded finance look for Africa, right? And I think, we could often have sometimes very square peg, round hole.
Exactly.
Because it's like, oh, we have a solution, but
it's a digital bank in Europe is doing it. So, we have to do it. Let's make it work here.
And we all know in Africa that's not the case, right? Customers here are, we do things in Africa that just doesn't happen across other regions, right? Like the stockfell you just mentioned. So it's so important to take a localized approach, because that's how we're going to succeed. If we cater to the customers we are looking to serve and solve everyday problems, that's how we're going to win.
I can actually add to that. We did quite a bit of research recently on Generation Alpha. I was like, after millennials, I was like, what came Generation Z and then what Generation Alpha? One of the very clear things that popped up in the research was actually the need already that's clear for embedded finance solutions in the Alpha generation. And that was quite interesting for us as well. It's like, we even had a mindset of, it's very much our user experience, come to us to get all the benefits that we want to offer as a business, but we also need to rethink that thing that the kids of today would like that, not necessarily by coming to my app. They would love that as part of some other user experience in a very efficient and slick manner. So it was also like, okay, that's going to... So I agree with that.
Yeah.
That was definitely something that pops up.
Absolutely. And that wraps up today's episode of the Issuer Academy. True inclusion means no one gets left behind. And today's conversation really reminds us how much power lies in education, access, and innovation. A big thank you to Drisha and to Theo for sharing your expertise and vision for your, the future of financial inclusion. We're so pleased to have you both. And yeah, looking forward to seeing more innovation across the continent where we are actually bringing, greater understanding and meaning to payments. So thank you so much for joining, and catch you next time on the Issuer Academy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drisha.
That wraps up today's episode of the Issuer Academy, Paymentology's podcast to innovate, scale, and provide impact. I hope you're leaving with fresh insights and actionable strategies to help you revolutionize your card programs and drive true impact in the world. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please leave a review to help us reach more pioneers like you. Also, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more inspiring episodes and behind-the-scenes content from Paymentology. Until next time, I'm Merusha Naidu. Keep innovating, keep scaling, and keep striving to make an impact.